Okay, welcome. Welcome to our last session of the for our masterclass track here about privacy-led marketing. I know it's late after 2 days full of input, but we want to take you a little bit through explaining how you can enhance your conversion with a privacy-led server-side tagging strategy. And we are very excited to guide you through a bit of high-level insights and then go into the details, including a live demo later. Presented by Max, one of our partners. But let's start high level. And that's interesting because why are we talking about server-side tagging? One big thing is that the landscape of how tracking works and how tracking implementation works is changing. And I found a study actually from Adobe from last year, I think it was July last year, talking about how many percent of customers out there, or like websites out there, are prepared for the deprecation of third-party cookies. Was 60%. It came down from, I think, 2022 was like 76%. Now it's 60, but still a very high percentage number of not being prepared. Why do we talk about this? Third-party cookies is like the main technology from the last decade on how to track conversions, how to track performance of your websites, of your ads, etc. And this is changing. Now, is it really changing? We just had a few updates also from Google, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, talking about not deprecating now third-party cookies. But this is like a long story, also not super surprising to getting this update. But in the end, it also doesn't really matter because the train is already going in a different direction. So it's good that we still have it around, but the trend is going in the direction of server-side, of zero first-party data on using different technologies to track conversions and track the success of your ad setup. Now, what is the change? So the change is very much going from I do client-side tracking and have a chaos on the client side with sharing data all across without control to more server-side control and different strategies on how to match your customer information to your performance of ads and how you do proper retargeting, etc. So we are going from an environment where we are doing tracking everything by default. We track as many data as we can, don't always know what we are tracking that for, and not using everything, to now go more in the direction of tracking what is really necessary and what is bringing us forward and what is bringing a change and a value for our users. We're going from untrusted third-party cookies into a more controlled environment, focusing on consented information, focusing on server-side controlled forwarding, focusing on first-party data as an advancement to have a better conversion tracking, and going from uncontrolled to controlled. And data flow is the main term here because we have so much data flowing around in different ways, and it's not always controlled and managed. And that's what is changing now, and what is also helping you to get way better results in the end. So it's not only about compliance; it's about regaining control on your customer's journey and making sure that you do this with an increased trust and transparency to make sure that your users are also on board with that and not sharing all the data across the internet. Now, why are trust and transparency actually important for all of that? Some people that joined the session earlier are already aware of this, but basically building trust is a very important point on building a good relationship with your customer and also setting up your business for long-term success. So when we look into customer data and how users are reacting based on, do I trust this brand, if they handle my data correctly or not, and how do I act then 63% of customers are buying new products if they trust the brand, and the other ones don't. And that's the interesting part here. So I'm more likely to do that if I trust the brand that they do take my data seriously and don't share it around without my consent. 55% are staying loyal to the brand, so basically coming back, buying again, if they know that the brand is handling my data correctly. 53 even advocate for you, so they tell others, oh, that's a good company, you can trust them, you can buy products from them, which is helping you to be successful on the long term. And that's not only in web, that's also in app, because 81% of brands prefer to use a product with a trusted journey and a trusted privacy experience. Now, we do have a small question for you. When you scan the QR code there, you can answer a question for us. Actually, 3 questions on what you think, how much % is behind these questions. So the first one is consumers are more open to granting permission to use the data if brands are more transparent about how they were using and securing it. So what do you think is the number here? Second question, before I reveal the numbers. Consumers say that knowing a company's privacy policy before making a purchase is important. What do you think? And the last one is on consumers only make online purchases or use digital services after making sure the companies are known for protecting user data. So that's a lot about brand trust and knowing what's going on. We good? So basically, numbers are pretty high actually. So 67% of consumers are more open to granting permission if they do trust the brand and think that it's transparent and handled securely. And 85% of the consumers say that knowing a company's privacy policy and how the data is used is important for them before they make a purchase, which is quite a lot and actually very surprising. So it's about being transparent and explaining what's going on so that they are willing to buy products from you. And 53% of consumers only make online purchases or use digital services after making sure the companies are known for protecting this. So that's a lot about building trust over time with your brand, on that you are handling this carefully and respecting also consumers' choice. So combining this two, so focusing on trust, focusing on the change in the landscape and how to optimize and get better control, it's actually a very good idea to invest into a proper first-party data strategy and server-side tagging as an addition to optimize your conversions. But how does it work? And let's dive into this. I'm starting with high level and then we deep dive into actual implementation. So this is a complex diagram. I'm using this for the first time, so bear with me. But I'm guiding you through this now. So we basically see here like the main components that you would have in a setup when you talk about client and server-side tracking and how you connect this with all your different tool stacks. Let's go through them step by step. So the first part is starts on my website and my CMP implementation. So I'm collecting proper consent for whatever I'm doing now, because consent is key. I need to ask for permission to then use the data. So that's what I'm doing on my website with my CMP. And then I have my tag management environment. So we do, with the goal of server-side tracking here, doing this through Google Tag Manager in this case. So we have a client-side web container and a server-side container. And what we're basically doing is we're loading tags client-side, and we are also streaming data to the server-side now, which is the main difference, and giving us more control. At the same time, we also maybe collect zero-party data and consent and send data about our customers into our CRM, into our marketing automation platform, and that's like the first thing. The main difference here, when we introduce server-side tag management, is that we have way more control. So we basically can now decide what data is flowing out of there. We're looking into the out in a second, but basically everything goes into the server side where I have full control about what's going on. Now, what's the next step? So we basically now have more interactions and we start nurturing our customer. So we have here the email sequence coming in. So basically when we look into our CRM, marketing automation, whatever the setup is, we also start sending our customers data. And we also get more information about what is the customer actually doing, what have they done, and I can communicate this back to my server side. I might have also different platforms. So if I have a hosted checkout flow, for example, which is on a different application, it's something that I connect to my server side so that I can re-identify the customer and make sure that I also collect consent from my server side again to make sure that this is cross-tracked for my customer here. Because cookies do not persist, also especially not across different applications. And that's the way how I can make this matching again and make sure that I have all the information about my customer in place and apply the right consent decision to make sure that I have the permission to share data to third parties. And now we go to exactly this. We share data with my third-party partners. So let's talk about advertising partners, we talk about Google, we talk about Meta, and we're sending data over from my server-side environment, and I have full control about what's going out. In the past, we had zero control because we had third-party cookies that my partner, Google or Meta, provided me, and they had control about what is being tracked, and I have very little overview about what's going on. Now I can control that. For example, let's say before, that's how the internet works, you have a third-party script tracking the IP address of the user. That's already PII information. So that's something I can cut out. So I can control what is being shared to the third party. And then focus on tracking analytics, tracking conversions in my setup with Google, Meta, and co. And that's like the high-level structure. And basically here, I then focus on my attribution without cookies, make sure that this is flowing server to server with a control. Also taking my CRM into this, make sure that I match the customer, build the right audiences, and send data across. I can also trigger enhanced conversion, take my zero first-party data and trigger this through my server-side direction to make sure that enhanced conversion is getting in there and improve overall my attribution and tracking, because it's a combination of third-party data that I collect on the website, conversions, but also things that are happening outside of my flow or my online flow, things that are happening afterwards, offline, or happening outside of platforms. And that's how I can do like a general setup of proper implementation of both client-side, server-side, plus zero first-party data in the overall architecture. So overall, just like to summarize, we have like a centralized enforcement of consent across different steps of the journey. I get full control about the data flow, what data is flowing, and how and where, and attribution in general. And I do this all with a privacy-first measurement in mind to make sure that I can build the right trust with my customer, because I promise them that I handle your data well, and I invest into the setup to make sure that I have fully control, and you don't need to say, I don't trust Google or I don't trust Meta, because I'm, as a brand, I'm in control of what data is sent to these third parties. And important is conversions in the end can happen anywhere, right? Server-side tracking helps us to connect these different destinations or like sources of where conversion happening to make sure that this is connected and is not breaking user trust, because I do other methods that would be way more invasive to the customer. Now, when I talk about tag management, then I'm referring here very much to the Google setup of Tag Manager. So Google server-side tag management in combination with the client side. Why is that a good choice to do right now? It's very much focused on, it's like the biggest tag management offering in the market. We have a lot of options for my client side plus my server side. And we have a big ecosystem dominance from Google's Tag Manager. At the same time, I have platform-neutral routing options, because I have a lot of infrastructure, a lot of tag templates that I can use for all the other destinations. For example, Meta, routing this through the tags to make sure that we have the server-side conversions flowing into Meta. I have first-party by design, focusing also on implementing this first-party mode, making sure that this is coming from my domain. And it's built for flexibility and control. So I can do easy setups, but I can also go fully flexible in very detailed setups if I want to, add a lot of custom logic on top. That's why we focus on Google server-side tag management here. And how do we help with Usercentrics? We actually are launching right now. We launched in April through a closed beta, our own product that helps you to host a server-side Google Tag Management container with an out-of-the-box consent setup when you use also our CMP. So basically, we focus on trust and tracking with server-side tagging by Usercentrics, and an easy solution to take the control and make an easy setup of your server-side tagging container. You get control over your measurement and all your data flows to third parties. You focus on bringing things first party with first party mode from and tagging direction to make sure that all the tracking infrastructure that you have goes under your domain. And we enable the server data integration enrichment. And the whole thing is something we do in a very easy format and doing the implementation with consent, which is, if you talk about this and doing this manually, the harder part to map this to all your different tags and doing this client and server side and cross applications. And this is the easy part here. You don't need to care about hosting, about implementation, scaling. That's all handled here. Now, what do I win with it? And with this, I want to hand over to Max, who will guide you a little bit through the details and why this is a good idea to do.
Thank you, Eike. And thank you all for joining as well for this, let's say, late day session on the second day. I'm very happy that Eike invited us to this talk as well, because we as DWC, we are an agency that is working with SST for, I think, more than three to 4 years now. And up to this point, server-side tagging was something which is exciting and especially relevant for our large clients, because using server-side tagging requires your own server, it requires cloud architects, it requires some expertise when it comes to DOS and DDoS protection, because you have actual parts of the infrastructure that you need to host somewhere. And now Usercentrics makes these things a little bit easier, so that everyone can benefit of the features that you get, or of the advantages that you get with server-side tagging. So I know that most of you are probably already a little bit familiar of what you can do with it and what advantages you get, but just before we head into the live demo on how to use the Usercentrics product to set it up, just a quick reminder, what can you do with it? What actual benefit does server-side tagging bring you? And for that, I would love to get like a quick opinion of you, or like some quick ideas to understand what your current understanding of server-side tagging is. If you have a second, please scan the QR code and put in the thing that you think is a feature or a benefit that you get through server-side tagging. So for example, data or more data. But I don't want to spoil you, but it's much more. Oh yeah, not getting ad blocked, very important, yeah. Performance uplift, quality of data, first party data, yeah. Trust, very important. Someone listened to our first session today. Measurement, yeah, more flexibility. Yeah, control is a very important point, as Eike already explained. You are in control of data that is shared with different third parties. But I see a trend going to data and better performance here. So let's take a look at a very complex sheet. I know you have seen enough of these things, so I will keep it on for a second. This sheet or this diagram tries to explain what the different benefits are that you as a marketer can get out of server-side tagging. You have the more resilient measurement, so the partly bypassing of ad blockers in terms of that you're protecting your users' privacy and that ad blockers don't need to block the tracking anymore. You have the server-to-server data flows, which are allowing you to enrich data, for example, with information from your CRM or email systems. You have the data control and governance aspect. You control what data is shared with third parties and what data is not. And you have security, which is also very important, because in the older days of client-side tagging, you are basically also, as a website provider or as a business owner, you need to put trust in the companies that are providing you with tracking services. And server-side tagging changes that, because you're routing all data through your server-side environment. You don't need to put external JavaScript files from trackers or from vendors to your website anymore. And last but not least, you have page performance. The less trackers you have on your website, because you have connected them via the server tag manager, the better the performance, the better the loading speed, core web vitals, all of these things will drastically improve. As most of you has mentioned that more accurate data is what you're most interested in, just to quickly remind of what the actual benefit of that is, with the example of the Google Marketing Platform, more and higher quality data in your analytics tool will get you better insights. You get more accurate reports, and you can do decisions that are actually based on data from as many users as possible. If you're using advertising networks like Google Ads, it's even more important, because these advertising networks are living off data that you share with them. For example, if you're like a typical e-commerce store that is heavily used by mobile users, you will probably have a percentage of, I don't know, 30, 40, maybe 60 or 70% Apple users, where the advertising tracking for Google Ads is heavily restricted by the tracking prevention that Apple implements in their browsers. Let's take a look at this example. A customer clicks on, or customer searches for a hotel in Hamburg, which is very hard to get during OMR, by the way. You get an advertisement for booking.com. You go on booking.com. Best case is you find a hotel during the OMR. You actually book it. And Booking would like to share that information back with Google Ads so that Google Ads can optimize the algorithm to target more users that are similar to you. If you have a high percentage of Safari users, for example, this connection here, this last dot, this last arrow will not work properly, because the tracking prevention will block Google from getting the necessary information. The more information you can send to Google through server-side tagging, or the higher the quality of the information you can send to Google, the better optimized the algorithm will be. So if you're using some kind of performance marketing tool, some kind of performance marketing network like Google, Avon, Criteo, Meta, or whatsoever, server-side tagging is crucial to run your advertising business with that. Who of you is already using server-side tagging? You can, again, please check the QR code so that we can get like a high-level understanding of how much of you are actually using it, either with the Usercentrics tool or with anything else. Okay, I see a lot of you scanning the code at least, that's good. And out of those who are actually already using it, how complicated was the setup? I'm asking that because, as I mentioned earlier, most of our larger clients are already using it for a couple of years, but the setup was never easy. It involved hosting tasks to host it in the cloud environment. It involved security tasks. It involves privacy tasks. We needed to involve the privacy team because we are adding a component into the infrastructure, and I can assume that it was maybe similar for some of you, and that's something that we would like to change with the Usercentrics product right now. So we are now jumping in a live demo, and I will show you how you can create a server tag manager with the Usercentrics SST product in, I hope that we can get it done in like 5 minutes, but please don't stop the time. But even if it's 6 or 7 minutes, I can tell you it's much less time than you would need to do it in a different environment. So for that, I will quickly change the screens here. And I hope that all of you, even in the back, can read this. If not, please show me somehow, and I can increase the size. Okay, that looks good. All right, so in preparation, I have already created the Google Server Tag Manager container. So I have created a Google Tag Manager account, created a web container and a server container, and I have signed up for the Usercentrics SST product. This is the admin interface that we see right here. What I'm doing right now is I will create a new container. So basically a new Server Tag Manager server. I will call that OMR test. And I will enter my Google Tag Manager or Server Tag Manager container config. This is something that you can get when you create a new server container in Google Tag Manager by clicking this Install Google Tag Manager icon in the menu of it. You will get this container config string that we need to put in right here. And we can select the server location. For my account, only Germany is enabled at the moment. And this also makes sense because we are in Hamburg here, so we want to use a local location. I would always recommend you to use one in Europe, best case Germany as well. But yeah, that's it. So I put my container config in here, I selected the server location, and I click the create container button. Now it takes a second. And here you can already see the dashboard that we have. So you see that automatically a server-side tagging domain was created, this cryptic id.usercentrics.io. You can see the location here, and you can see the usage, so how much traffic actually goes through that server tag manager. And you could also change the container config as well as the name of the container. If you have multiple, you can differentiate them by the name, for example. You're free to use the domain that we see right here, the custom created one, but of course it makes sense to use your own subdomain. This is especially important for ad blockers or to prevent you from getting ad blocked. But this also makes sense for the lifetime of cookies, especially in Safari. So I would always recommend you to add your own domain, which is very straightforward as well. You just put your domain in here. I will just say sst.omr.com whatsoever. I click the add domain button, and it will now show me instructions what I have to change in my DNS settings. If you're using a tool like Cloudflare or something similar, you also have the extensive documentation here that tells you what you need to do, but at the end you can also forward this to your IT department if you're not aware on how to do that. It's really just adding one line in the system of choice that you have for DNS management. After you have done that, you can refresh it, and you see that the domain will be activated. That easy. Since I don't have access to omr.com and this domain does not belong to me, I will continue the demo with one that I've already prepared, which is this demo account that we have right here. So I have connected the domain that's called sst.dwccon.com. This is my test domain, it's active, and I can use it. Now I'm heading over to my demo environment. This is a simple, easy WordPress WooCommerce store. There's basically nothing on here besides regular client-side tracking with Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics. Nothing special, probably a similar setup that most of you have here, at least the ones who are not using SST yet. What I'm doing right now first is I'm changing the implementation of Google Tag Manager on my website. So I will quickly adjust the code that I'm using to load Google Tag Manager. So as you can see, it's probably a little bit small, so I will increase the size a bit. You can see here I have the Usercentrics CMP script, because I'm using the Usercentrics CMP. And you see that we have the domain right here. In preparation, I have already changed that. Previously, it was googletagmanager.com. Well, it's hard to write with one hand, actually. And basically what you need to do is you need to change that and replace it with one of the domains that is connected, either the one that you have connected or the one that is defined by Usercentrics by default. So I will switch that back and say sst.dwccon.com. That's it, just replacing that one string here. We'll update it. And now I will also make sure that my client setup works as expected. So I will check the GA4 tag that I'm using to trigger Google Analytics. And in the GA4 tag, I need to add a specific value, which is called server container URL. This basically tells the Google Tag Manager where it should send data to. So if it should send it directly to Google or to a server Tag Manager environment. Again, this is the domain that we have connected earlier. And after I have done these two things, I should be able to demonstrate that the whole setup works as expected. So I will start the server preview mode. So this window will preview us all requests that are going onto the server. And I will start the client preview mode. And if everything goes well, and if I have prepared it properly, then we should see in the server environment a page view event that is being sent from the client to the server environment, which is hosted in Usercentrics. And as you can see, two tags are being fired. We are sending data to Google Analytics. This is this GA4 tag. And we are sending data to Meta, because I have created a Meta pixel in the beginning as well. As Eike mentioned, there's a native integration with the Usercentrics CMP. So both of these tags are connected to the consent of Usercentrics automatically. So what happens now if I change my consent, and I will quickly revoke my consent for Meta and reload the page. Then we should have a second page view here. And as you can see, now I'm only sending data to GA4, not to Meta again. This integration with Usercentrics is what makes the Usercentrics product so easy to set up, because you don't have to jiggle around with different consent states that you somehow need to transfer from client to server side. Just by using the Usercentrics CMP and by using the Usercentrics SST hosting, the consent is automatically transferred to the server and can be interpreted by the tags that are being loaded. All right. I don't know if this was less than 5 minutes. I don't think so, but I hope that it was still pretty fast. And yeah, I'm now happy to answer your questions if you have them. And if you're interested in that product, if you want to try it out by yourself, or if you have any specific questions that you want to just call offline or not here in this masterclass, feel free to either contact us as DWC or just join the waiting list and someone from Usercentrics will reach out to you. All right, thank you. Any questions? I saw a hand there. With the jacket.
Hello? Can you hear me? I don't know if that's working or not. Yeah? Yeah? Okay, thanks for that, Max. A couple of kind of rapid fire or questions I'm just thinking about. Is there support for like first party mode, i.e., switching out the SST domain for like kind of a Cloudflare like redirected kind of metrics folder? And the second question, follow-up one, is I'm interested maybe later at more in terms of the integration between the kind of front end and back end, because it's kind of going into black box in terms of that kind of categorization. I mean, it's nice in terms of obviously not needing to kind of change in two places, only change in one place. And I'm curious to know if that also then flows through to the cookie table and the other kind of connected kind of areas. But yeah, expanding out that piece and like the time saving that's involved with making sure that synchronization exists.
Yep. Sure. So regarding your first question, yes, this would be. Sorry, can you hear me? It's it's the headphones again. Okay, now better now. Okay. Regarding the first question, yes, that would be possible. If I understand it correctly, the question is about not using a subdomain, but for example, a specific path on your website. So like omr.com/measurement or something like that, for example. Yes, so if you're using something like Cloudflare or any other kind of proxy tool that is able to route requests to a different server address from a specific path, yes, then that would be possible as well. So especially Cloudflare plus Usercentrics SST would work like that, definitely. Regarding your second question, maybe I can just show it to you how I set it up for this demo here. Right here, so this is my server configuration that I have, so the backend part of it. And I have my two tags, the Google Analytics tags and the Metapixel tag. And for example, let's take the Metapixel tag. I have a trigger here that basically says, fire that tag as long as the consent DPS string, so that's like a string that is automatically sent to the backend, contains Metapixel, which is the consent string that I have in my CMP settings. So we're basically passing a string from the front end to the back end that contains a list with all services that are consented to. And you can use that string on the server because it's sent with every event to validate if you want to trigger a specific tag or not. Does that make sense? All right. Any more questions?
You mentioned about reducting the IP address of the user, and as a result, this would lead to better, the user would feel more safe with his data. And my question is, how do we let the user know about this change on the parameter, and how do they understand this change and the value of it?
I mean, the best option probably would be to already do it in the consent banner when the user consents to something. So you can, for example, if you're using Usercentrics, you can change the text in the consent banner and say, for example, with your consent, we are forwarding data to Google Ads, but we are detecting your IP address. Either we are removing it completely, or we are like removing the last 2, 3 characters of it, whatsoever you want. But that's one place where you could do that, where it also makes sense because it's connected to the consent. Other option would be in the privacy policy, of course, where you need to describe all the data that you share with third parties anyway. So there you would say, we are sharing no IP address, or we are sharing just parts of an IP address whatsoever. But I would recommend you to do it in the CMP already.
I mean, you were also in the session before, right? And that's exactly the topic, right? In terms of communication, different communications throughout the privacy journey. You just like focus on how do I bring this as a value, right? So basically you show that, hey, you can trust us. We are also taking care of making sure that we protect your data as best as possible.
All right.
You also said something about that you can control the data more or better to where it is transferred. But where do we do the setup? So how do we implement that the data layer sort of like only send the parameter that we want to send to Meta or Google Analytics?
Okay, so the core principle of the server tag manager is that this, I will wait until you have your, all right, sorry. The core principle of the server tag manager is that you're basically routing all data through it. So this is the first step. If you're not using a server tag manager, if you're relying on client-side tagging, you will implement code to your website, which automatically collects something and shares it with others. You are not in control of that. If the tracking provider changes the tracking script and collects something new, you have no way of preventing it from doing that. The control is on the side of the tracking provider. With SST, you are in control because the data routes through your own server and you can filter or change that. How you can do that technically is, for example, one way to do it through the transformation feature of the Google Server Tag Manager. So the Server Tag Manager has a tool here that's called transformations, which you can use to remove specific event data from your event data layer, for example, or add specific data from your CRM system before triggering specific tags. So before sending it to Google or Meta or others. So this transformation would also be an option to remove the IP address, for example, but we have also some clients who are using it, for example, to hash an email address before they are sharing it with third parties, or to hash a specific account ID, account number that they don't want to share like in plain text with third parties. Does that make sense? All right, thank you.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, you hear me? Yes.
Yes, perfect.
I would look to know, or I would like to know, how would the pricing look like? Is it just the incoming request to the server GTM, or does the size matter? And you have, yeah, pricing number for like 10 million hits or something like that.
Yeah, let me take this. So when talking pricing, we are still, and that's what we said before, we are still in a beta right now, and we don't have the pricing fully public yet. So I probably need to come back to you, but we can discuss that. So we don't have this fully there, but it's basic. So the basic idea is, yes, it's on the kind of requests that are sent. So it's based on the server interactions. And you can expect a pricing that you would also assume from the market right now.
All right, anyone else?
Not so much a question, but as a statement. Just aside from Europe, I'm seeing kind of lots of like class actions in America, specifically in California, where it's $5,000 per user violation, and there's this question over IP addresses within there, and it's almost becoming necessary to have a server-side solution to strip out or hash or hide IP addresses in order to mitigate those lawsuits. So, and the same in Europe with the 4% of global revenue or 10% on DMA. So it's kind of like, I guess the real question is, why are people not using server-side already, sort of thing? And I'm curious to know if anyone's not using it, really. That's my question.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And actually I just had a call yesterday morning with a client who said that they want to implement, like you probably know that all these kind of widgets, that you see on hotel websites with rating and stuff like that, or employer rating, something like that you can put on your website. And they actually got a fine for that, because just by implementing the widget, so basically just an image on their website, they're sharing an IP address with a third party, which is completely unnecessary, right? It's this rating provider does not need to get the IP address of the user who sees the rating usually. So how we fix that is that we use the server tag manager as some kind of proxy to load the image from this third-party provider. So they still have the latest rating through it, but they are not sharing the IP anymore. And I would totally agree with the fines in California, and especially the fines in the European region that we have here, that the server tag manager is a great solution for all of these kind of scenarios where you are loading external content in your website, but where you don't want or don't need to share IP addresses of your end users. And this goes far beyond the typical marketing tools, where of course it also makes sense, but if we are seeing modern websites, we usually see something between 5 and 20 different vendors who are receiving IP addresses just by browsing on these websites, and SST can be a great way to mitigate that. And regarding your comment, at least from our clients, the only reason why they are not using SST is because it's too complex or too expensive, and we're hoping to change that with the tool.
Yeah, exactly. So the easiness of implementation is one of the big items. But maybe there's somebody here in the room that that wants to answer that. Feel free. Very interesting for us to also hear that feedback.
Yeah, to hear that.
Any more questions? Good.
Right.
Then thank you all. Feel free to sign up on the waiting list. We are getting this out of the closed beta very soon, and then hoping to help you all to have a very easy setup of server-side tagging and a good server-side tracking structure. Thank you.
Thank you.